listening to Real Coaching Radio TV, building a positive network.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Kids Talk Foundation, a global nonprofit organization providing youth advocacy, television programming, and training services in the United States, along with comprehensive medical and educational services for the developing world, most recently in Kenya, Africa, where Kids Talk Foundation provides a feeding program, medical care, and educational services to over 1,300 young people each day. Please help our youth and place your donation. Go to www.kidstalk.org. Are you in the entertainment industry? If you answered yes and you want to promote yourself, your passion, and profession, check out Creative Independent Artist magazines at CIAartists.com, endorsed by Kids Talk Foundation worldwide.
Welcome to Unopened Gifts, the weekly one-hour program dedicated to understanding the human potential that lies within us and the abundant life that lies before us. Inspired by the personal journey of our host, James McPartland.
You know, I don't know that I could be any more inspired today than I've been in the past, because I've got a very unique and special guest joining me from the Jersey Shore today. It is Danny Bader. We'll get to Danny in a moment. We're going to hear some colorful aspects of his life journey, learn a little bit about the city of Philadelphia and where cream cheese comes from, and also the genesis of his brand new book. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to Unopened Gifts. For those of you coming back, thanks for coming back. You know, the objective on this show every Thursday afternoon at about 5 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock, is to inspire you, the viewer or the listener, whether you're with us live or barreling down the road on an MP3, to hear something from the guests that come on this program who've done unique things, and not because of what they've done, but because of what they've learned, that you hear something, provide a tool or a spark of insight to help you move forward in the great game of life. And I don't think today will disappoint you. As a matter of fact, it will inspire you. As I said, Danny Bader joins us from the Jersey Shore. I happen to know that on, well, let's just say I've been doing some recon work on the old boy.
There you go.
Spent some time with Danny last week getting tuned up for this program. Danny is an author. He's a, I guess you'd say, soon-to-be bestseller. His fourth child is this brand new book of his, which we're going to talk a whole bunch about. But Danny lives in Philadelphia. He's married, has 3 kids. He's an international trainer and lecturer. He's a guy that helps people recognize their vision and, I guess you'd say, either not only light the spark, but help provide the pathway for people to let that vision unfold. And as I mentioned, his 4th child, and make sure I've got the name of this book right, because it really struck me about the fact that there's probably a story behind this story, Back from Heaven's Front Porch. Danny, before we get to the book, let's get to you. Tell us a little bit about the Danny Bader story, because I only gave the Cliff Notes version.
Good, thanks, James, and welcome everybody. Glad to be here. So the Cliff Notes version expanded of the Danny Bader story is that I grew up outside of Philadelphia with 6 brothers and a sister, loving family, mom and dad, up until I was 28 years of age. Everything was pretty good, pretty easy, middle class, no real challenges in life. When I was 28, I had an accident that involved a friend of mine and myself, and we had a metal ladder, and we hit a electric line. And that resulted in my friend's death that day and also caused me to die. My body stopped working. I had a very interesting experience when that happened. And then when I came back into my body at 28 years of age, I think that's really where what you talk about, James, our learnings and our journeys and our ability to be resilient, that's really where it started. Because I blamed myself a lot for my friend's death. And I used a distinction in the book, I was living, but I really wasn't alive.
And you know, it's what's really powerful about that story, Danny, and you know, I think as we all think in pictures, the words do one thing, but the visual image that comes forward as you share that sends chills certainly down my arms and legs and back when I think about it. And it's often in life, as you and I touched on, and I've learned time and time again by the great guests on this program, is you know, the life lessons don't come from the victories. I don't know that we learn much from the successes in life. It's the things that set us back that we can learn from if we allow them to serve as a force for good in our life. And what you just described would be enough for a couple things to happen. One, for you to really give up your life. 2, to be down a path that perhaps one could never recover from and have a reasonable excuse, if you will.
Sure.
But something, what was it that had you come out of that, if you will, to the extent that one ever comes out of that, and to be down this path of your journey now?
Yeah, that's a great question, James. And I actually had coffee this morning with some friends of mine, great people who lost their daughter 4 years ago when she was 17 in a car accident. We had that same conversation. You know, what about it clicked for us? And for this wonderful lady, for her, she was sitting on her patio, and her young daughter, her other daughter, was in the pool and yelled to her and said, hey, mom, and that clicked her out of it. She said, you know what, I'm still a mom, and I've got to be here for these two girls. For me, it was a conversation I had with my mother. After the accident, you said I was going down that road, and I certainly blamed a lot of people and the world for the injustice that happened, and my friend should be alive, and people don't understand, and let me have another drink, and let me try to do, all these other distractions in my life that were very unhealthy. And for me, what really changed it is I remember I was in North Carolina, and as you said, we could end our life. We could choose, especially from some of our challenges, and that was a choice that I was very, very close to. And I remember calling my mom from a phone booth. Now, this is October 1992, so, we still had phone booths back then. And I was at a small hotel in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and I went out and had a few beers and, a shot or two of tequila, as I often did back then, and then called my mom. For some reason, I saw that phone booth, and it was almost lit up magically. I often reflect on that. And I called her, and I chatted with her, and very quickly in our conversation, she just stopped, and she said, when are you coming home? We can't wait to see you. And I couldn't even talk at that point. I mean, this is coming up on almost 20 years ago to be in October. And for some reason right there, something clicked for me. I think it was probably the connection I had with my mom, and probably the image of all those people that did love me and wanted me to come back home, whereas I was going to choose a different path. And the thing that's interesting for me that happened right there is that's the first time from July 28th, when the accident occurred, until October, James, that I actually started to have a vision of getting better. And for those people that might be familiar with my work and the book, my company is called Jackrabbit because the jackrabbit of all the animals in the animal kingdom has really good vision. Its eyes sit pretty far back on its head and very high up. So it essentially has a real good awareness of its whole environment. And that's why I chose that metaphor of the jackrabbit, because at that point in time, I did not have an awareness. I had a singular focus, and it was just on the fact that I was a victim of an accident. It was unfair, and nobody understood. So the conversation with my mom was that one turning point, that put me on the path to recovery. The recovery didn't happen real fast, real easy, but that was the point that put me back in the right direction.
Danny, I think what's refreshing about the message, as painful as that message comes to us in life, and I've heard the phrase over and over again called growing pains, and I guess it's called growing pains for a reason, right? Not growing pleasures.
Right.
And those pains can be pretty deep, and sometimes it is the depth that helps us find the space with which to bounce back or spring back or jackrabbit forward, if you will. And tell me this, in your work, and probably just in life in general, as you talk to people, whether they're learning more about your work or in one of your seminars or you're just in the grocery store, I find I can often learn a lot about people in a short period of time by virtue of the words that they use, right, and which paints a picture, and where they are projecting their life to be and who's in charge or who's to blame. Right. And it's easier said than done to say, listen, change your words, change your language, recognize you're responsible. That is, for many people, sometimes, well, it happens in an instant, but it might take 20 years to get to that instant. Or, it's a series of further setbacks. But in the work that you do or people that you come across, and thinking about the folks that tune into this program who are looking for something to help keep that torch lit, I mean, how do you advise people to shift?
Well, it kind of depends, James, if I enter into a deeper conversation with them there. I've got in the book, there's 5 principles. So the book is called Back from Heaven's Front Porch, 5 principles for creating a happy and fulfilling life. So as I started to get better, and I reflected on that process probably about 10 years after the accident, when I felt like I was moving in the right direction, and I was married, I had a few kids, I was engaged in a good career again, I thought, I was actually at a coaching school in Santa Barbara out there, the Hudson Institute, and they said, put together a model that you would take somebody through for your coaching. And that's where I really distilled it and said, well, I kind of went through that. So what principles did I learn to practice that got me back to greater levels of happiness and fulfillment. And they are to develop vision and create reality. That's one principle. It's tied to action in the middle. Be still, know thyself, seek support, and evolve to undergo continuous and gradual change. So if I enter into conversations with people, and as you say, you really kind of tune in, I would tune into their not only what they say, but how they say it and what their energy is, then you'd have to just intuitively, and you and I would do, just start to ask them questions if they're open to kind of peel back that onion and see where they are. For instance, I found people that are not happy and fulfilled. They might be making some money, but they're not really doing the job that they want. So that may then lead us to the principle of know thyself, right? Socrates talked about your strengths, your talents, your spiritual heritage, your place in the universe. So sometimes they're usually disconnected because they really slow down and get to their core. They're in a great job, they're making a lot of money, they look like a success on the outside, but they just don't like what they're doing every day. So then we kind of got to dial back to that. Sometimes other people are just stuck. So I may pull them then into the vision and ask a question like, hey, let's say you and I bump into one another, James, a year from now in San Diego, and we cross paths, and I say, James, my God, I haven't seen you in a year. How you doing? How's life? And you say, it is fabulous. And I say, why? You should very clearly be able to predict that future that you want a year from now. That's that vision. And a lot of people don't think that way. They say, gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be happy in a year. And I say, well, what if you were? What would that look like? They may start to go about the money or the relationships or their health or the weight they're going to lose or where they're living or where they're working. But it's really powerful to start them to paint a picture of what they want to be the reality.
Well, and you touch on some really great points, and sometimes I find on this program, experts like yourself, I wish I could run you off on the copy machine and shoot you out into the marketplace, right, so that people could have a blast of you. But some folks will tune in, and we're going to get people onto your website and find out how to get excerpts of your book and learn more about your training. Right. More often than not necessarily attuned to this program, but to many seminars I've participated in, we get folks inspired, but sometimes we can't get them to move a little bit further forward,
right,
just to take that next step. And do you encourage people, and I suspect you do, if often when people ask me about an unopened gift and what is an unopened gift and how do I find my gift and I couldn't figure it out and I must have missed the window of opportunity, my response is instinctively if you quiet yourself,
right, you
probably know if you allow fear to move off to the side. Mm-hmm. Other people who know you well enough probably know you better than you know yourself are apt to say, I've seen your eyes dance when you do X.
Right.
And when you were a kid, and we're all a kid in different sized bodies, older bodies, say, what did you really want to be when you grew up, or where did you get the greatest sort of affirmations? Right. I think we know maybe are fearful, but as folks tune in, right, if there is something that they really want to do, is there something you'd say to them immediately after this program, right? You get off the internet, take this particular step. What would you have people do to say, look, move that forward, you've got this gift, you've got to use it?
Sure. So I would get them to, again, back to the vision. So if they've got that gift and they want to move to another place, then I would say immediately when you get off of this call right now, where would you go and what would you do to move you there? So I'm really trying to get them to action. Where would you go and what would you do? And a lot of times they go, I don't know. And then you and I just come back and say, well, what if you did know? Because they do know, you just got to give them another 2 for a quarter, another chance. So for instance, the way it was for me, I wanted to write a book, right? I wanted to write this book. I worked on it many times. I started it, I stopped it, and I finally started to get serious and really think about that action, which is a double-sided arrow at the middle of my model, and it's certainly in a lot of models. And an action for me was to email a friend of mine that I worked with to get the email address for her sister, who is an editor in Colorado. And that was the action, because I had a 260-page Word document now that I was calling my book, but it was nowhere ready for a book. So that's what you think. Okay, if I get off this, where could I go? What could I do? Because I need an editor. But most people, even on their list, if they had a to-do list, they would put get editor. Well, that's not really an action. What are you going to surf the internet? Are you going to pick up your favorite book and find out who edited that and then try to connect with them on Facebook? So I would talk to the folks. It's really important to have that vision, because you don't want to be running all over with the actions that aren't necessarily driving to the vision. There's an old proverb that says, chase 2 rabbits, you don't catch either one. So vision for me, the name of my blog is It All Begins with a Vision. So as you and I are coaching people, and that's what they say, they're stuck, and here's what I should really be doing. I love working with kids, and I love the creative aspect of that. I would take them first before they say, what can I do to go work with kids? I would try to paint that vision and get a little bit clearer on that. You know, where do you want to work with kids? How do you want to work with kids? You know, what's working with kids going to pay you? You know, as you see fit, and can you take that pay reduction now? Will that be an increase or a reduction? Well, no, I couldn't right now. I kind of need to keep working my full-time job. Great. So then the vision is full-time job, part-time working with kids. And a lot of times what's interesting, James, as you know, I've come across a tremendous amount of people that hate their job. And once they start to talk about what their passion or what their vision and their gifts and their talents are, sometimes when we can just put them in a position to use those only for 3, 4, 5 hours a week, the job gets much, much bearable. And they go, this is great. I don't have to leave my job. The people there are nicer. The work's more engaging, you know, because they're plugging in a little bit to their purpose. A lot of times people think, oh, I got to totally get rid of this and then, you know, put all the water over here on this plant. And sometimes it's interesting to say, no, let's just dabble in that a little bit. So let's get you 2 or 3 hours volunteering at a children's hospital. And let's start to get that. And that really can raise some energy. Or let's get you involved with Make-A-Wish. And you'll go out and meet some families and grant 2 wishes. You know, so it's interesting when you start to explore that with folks.
You know, and really, I'd like to build on that. Of so many great points here. You know, selfishly, I'm going to play this back a lot, not to listen to me, but to listen to you today.
Yeah, I will to listen to you too.
And you know what I take from that, which I think is really important. You know, in the game of life, and I've been through this, and I know, as I say, it's the setbacks that allow us to go forward or can teach us the things. At one time, I thought it had to be quantum leaps. And it was quit a job or quit a relationship or make a radical shift, and that's what it was going to take. When actually your point is just brilliant, that sometimes it's the small series of victories that come that take an action towards a path of something that you love to do. Someone wants to sing and they do something at church. Somebody wants to write and they enroll in a class, right? Somebody wants to learn how to work with children, so they start spending time with someone else's family. It's a small step, would you say, that sort of makes them suddenly realize that the things that they were blaming. Well, let me put it to you another way I think might illuminate this in a special way. I learned some time ago, and I didn't understand it until I started to see it in my own life, that stress often comes from not doing something we know we should do.
Right.
And it's like a series of 1,000 cuts. And it's easy, and then that frustration becomes blame because it's other people that are interfering when reality is other people who are just living their life. Matter of fact, we're not thinking much about us at all, to be quite honest.
Right.
But as you say, when you begin to take some steps congruent with who you are, the stress starts to dissipate, and you look around and you start feeling a lot different about people and places, environment, your job. And I think that that's a pretty powerful step, or series of steps like you shared, that somebody could do today right after this program.
Sure. I think you're right, they can. And that's, you know, in my own journey with the book, for instance, as I started to take those actions around moving towards getting an actual book published, you know, everything got better. You know, years ago I thought, I hate my job, I want to quit my job, I want to be a writer. You know, so I was just going to cast all that to the wind and then go start writing books. Now, I still would like to evolve to being a full-time writer, write a lot of books. But you understand sometimes you just can't jump off into that other world. You know, you've got to just start paving that road until it's now it's a super highway and there's no risk from walking out of this job and into that other life because you're there. So it's a great point that you make. You know, so many people think that vision, you know, when I talk about vision, it has to be this big grandiose vision. And sometimes that's great, but you know, you talk about relationships. If somebody's in a relationship that's in low energy and a lot of conflict right now, they could have a vision that says, you know, when I wake up tomorrow next to this person, this is how those first 4 or 5 minutes are going to go.
Nice.
That's a wonderful, perfect, real type of vision. Verse, you know, we both get out of bed, we hardly talk, we go our separate ways, if that's where folks are.
Yeah. So if a person has visions of Philly cheesecake sandwiches, are you a conduit to FedEx them to the people who want to be inspired by the culinary delights of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
got to throw in a plug for the city of brotherly love there.
Yeah, soft pretzels, cream cheese, Philly cheesesteaks. Philadelphia Phillies have won 7 games. They're chasing the wild card, so it's all good here in Philly.
Well, and listen, and just like one would hear in a rock and roll song, or for that matter, a country western song, you are down the shore, is the Jersey Shore?
It is the Jersey Shore. Yeah, it's a little bit south of where people would think the Jersey Shore is, with Snooki and all her gang. So I am in a pretty cool town called Avalon right now.
So it is.
And
you're not.
Avalon in Greek mythology was heaven. So it's a cool place. Actually, where I met my wife here in Avalon. My buddy's got a house. We've got a little place a couple towns over, but I'm going to spend time with some college buddies tonight.
And so a little bit of Bruce Springsteen comes to mind as a guy on the Jersey Shore.
Right. Yeah, Bruce probably about an hour and a half north of here, where he grew up.
Well, I know he's watching, and if he's not, he should be.
All right.
Because he himself has got some amazing gifts, and much like his gifts as a guy still doing it at 60, what I think is important about the things that you share in the program here is, the gifts open all throughout our lives, and we learn a lot about ourselves through the journey.
Right.
And as I was alluding to earlier, as I can remember many times speaking to college age individuals who think, I haven't figured out the major, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, and then we get caught up perhaps fulfilling someone else's dream, and it's never too late, right, to light that torch and say, now's the time.
Right.
And what I think was interesting too about your journey, as you shared, is that manuscript that became a recent introduced book to the world has it been a 10-year overnight success?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's been 10 years for sure. I don't know about the success part. Like, we're getting some great reviews, so I'm holding a strong vision for its success. But again, you and I have talked before. Success that I sell 3, 4, 5 million copies. That would be one measurement of success. But as I've talked to a couple of people, and they've talked to me about parts of the book that really cause them to slow down and reconsider, and that reconsidering is going to let them take some different actions, that's success right there. And that's really why I wrote the book. You and I laugh. Certainly you want some commercial success. I got 1 kid in college, 2 more coming. So we certainly want to make some money, but I think it's really important the process by which we make money is real important. I've had a lot of people make a lot of money, but there's an interesting quote comes to mind. Many men can make a fortune, few can make a family. So it kind of gets to that point. Let's go make some money and have strong career, but let's watch our process by which we do that. Or maybe you don't need to make a whole lot of money, and you're achieving success by what you give to people. So there's a whole interesting conversation. We could do a whole other show on that probably. Money equals success. Ooh, I would think differently.
Well, and it's really, I think, as you're talking about vision and getting clear is it's having definition of what that place looks like when you arrive. And sure. I think it's very common, certainly it's been in my life, that one is working very, very hard, diligently, going after it every day. And if you stop that person and say, where are you trying to get?
Right.
It's a fuzzy answer, and that's not a criticism because people are really busy. And you talk about the material side. I had a version of my life that I fell out of, grew out of, got yanked out of, and that was my own version of Success Mountain and all the material stuff and pictures of myself in my wallet, and reading the press releases and feeling like Mr. Wonderful and getting someplace and looking around going by myself. And saying, even though I was married, even though there were a lot of people around, I was the loneliest guy in the crowded room. Saying, who sold me on this plan? And what I take from your work and your gift and your unfortunate, now fortunate journey is, to get really clear, to understand where you're trying to get. How would you how would you measure success, and what's something you can do today, an action to take you in that step? Because it isn't the next 24 hours. It could be over a 10-minute period today, and then 20 minutes tomorrow. And I reference your 10-year overnight success from the standpoint of perseverance. Many people who would have started writing a book, and I know what that's like because mine's getting ready to have its 3rd birthday. But after 10 years, you might just say, well, the heck with it. I'm not destined to be an author, no matter how many times you touch it. But you brought it across the finish line, and I think that's an important lesson in and of itself. That the timeline is the timeline, and probably the book is all the better for the amount of time it ultimately took. But it doesn't have to be an overnight success, right? It could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, but if it's your passion, you stay on the path. Would that be,
right.
Is that reasonable?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I couldn't, even though when I stopped, there was still a part of me that wasn't comfortable with the stopping. So then when you do that, when you stop and there's a discomfort that you stopped, and chances are you're going to pick that back up. I've got as I said, 6 brothers, and many of them are musicians, and my second from the top, my brother Eddie's a fabulous drummer, and he's not drumming that much. He's also a fabulous carpenter. He has all those skills, that right brain creative. And he and I often talk about getting back to the kit, because I just know that's a part of his soul. And he's starting to make headway back to it. So it's interesting when you when you talk about that overnight success. And I've got a brother of mine out in California, doing the whole acting and commercials and music and all that. And he's been out there 10, 12 years now. And he absolutely has a vision that he is going to achieve some type of success in that business, in that show business. And when he does, people go, oh my gosh, he's on that sitcom now. He's an overnight success. But as you and I say, he's been out there 13 years now, driving an old Ford Explorer and all those other things. So, you get clear on that vision, and you make sure that that's aligned with kind of who you are inside. And, good things usually happen.
And when he makes it, they'll say, oh, you're the lucky one. And I think luck comes from working really hard, going after what you want, being clear that that's what you want, right? And
you got it.
Stay in the path.
That's it. And to do that, as we talk about perseverance, and you alluded to it as well, we're surrounded by a lot of people. One of the principles that and these certainly aren't mine, I just kind of uncovered them on my journey. And when somebody pushed me and said, put this into a model, then I had to name those 5 principles, that I practice. And one is called seek support. And I think it's very, very important, because when you surround yourself with people that care for you, that love you, that share the vision. I don't know how many friends told me, come on, will you finish this book already? We're sick and tired of hearing it. And now some of them, I'll be with one guy tonight that has it and that read it, and he's like, man, I'm so proud of you. And I said, I love you, and I'm proud of you because you kept pushing me to finish it. And those people too will tell you when you're off track. And certainly my family is my nucleus, and there's no shortage of opinions. So any of us, if we start to go down a wrong road, whether it's because of our success and we start to get a little puffed up like the peacock, or if we just go down a wrong road, they are there, to bring us back in. But where I faltered after the accident, I was surrounded by so many loving, wonderful people, but I wouldn't let them in. So what I learned is when that proverbial stuff hits the fan, one of the first things you got to do is go get your people. You need to. And all we want to do is run away because nobody understands. But I would challenge folks, if you're kind of in a stuck place right now, here's an action for you. You call somebody you love and see if you can get together a cup of coffee. That's a real good action.
Life is a team sport, and it's interesting as you share that, Danny, because you can look at there's popular research that's surfaced in the last 12 months has to do with happiness.
Right.
And you can catch on some of the popular books, and whether it's The Art of Happiness or The Happiness Advantage, and the research around the distinction between what my life had been like, and maybe many that we come across, that if I achieve this, then I'll be happy. And the science now shows that if you learn to be happy, then you can get what it is that you're pursuing if you do it with passion, surrounded by people that love you, as you said, will be honest with you, right? Yeah. But that will give you the I think there's the difference between that group that you described, and maybe there are some friends or family members or colleagues that could hold you back, and that holding you back, saying you can't do this, who are you to think you could do that, often comes from folks being insecure about their own journey, not wanting to be left behind. So I think understanding who those players are in your life, and maybe finally for the folks that would be giving us guidance or input or advice, my advice to people is, look at those individuals and their life and who they surround themselves with and how they spend their time and how they spend their money and what's important. And if you aspire and admire what they're doing, pay close attention to what they say. If it's the type of life that you wouldn't want to lead, then probably not going to help you very much.
Yeah. Well, there's that other aspect to surround yourself with those great people, but also avoid negative people.
And everywhere.
And,
Yep.
and sometimes they're in your family, and you can still love them, but just love them a little bit from a distance. You know, we all know those people that when we show up, we're not quite sure which one we're going to get. So sometimes when I'll show up now and I get somebody who I love and who is a good person, but they're kind of in that state, I'll try to bring them back. But if they don't want to be brought back, I can't do anything. So I'll just, just kind of remove myself from them. Maybe follow up in a day or two, but that's, you got to seek support. You also have to try to be support for people.
Watch out for the vampires.
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly.
All right, so let me do a little bit of a commercial here. I'm going to do a commercial on you. Welcome some of the people that have tuned in, because you've got lots of fans going on. So Danny Bader's joining us from the beautiful South Shore of Avalon.
Yes, New Jersey.
In sunny New Jersey, to the extent it's still sunny out there this afternoon. Yep. A prolific author, a writer, a man who's overcome an amazing setback in life, the loss of a close friend, the loss of his own life, if you will, and we're going to talk about that in a moment here, who's come back to recognize what one of his many gifts are, to bring that gift to the world by virtue of his speaking and his travel and his writing to help people live an inspired life. And then I want to tell you that of the thousands of people who tune in, I want to welcome some partners, our good friends at Blog TV, Stickum, of course, our team at Real Coaching Radio. We have Receiver Internet Radio, Radio Roku, New Media Radio, and our partner Stitcher. So we have a group hug going on around you right now,
Perfect.
Danny.
Thank you. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it.
We've got you literally surrounded.
Great.
The marshmallows are roasting. So tell me,
cool.
Danny, how do people? You've given us a couple of ways to do it, but let me get clear with you, if I can use your words. How do people find you? Give us the website address. Give us one more time the name of the book. How do people get information about you and learn more about you?
Sure, thanks. So the book is called Back from Heaven's Front Porch. It's available on my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Christian Books. It's out there in a lot of different places. My website is www.dannybader, DANNYBADER.com. And on there you could find out a little bit more about the principles. There's some videos on there where I'll talk specifically about some of the principles and the Jackrabbit model overall. And also there's an opportunity for you to contact me. So certainly if you have an email or thoughts that you'd want to get across, to get back to you and serve you as I can.
Well, as you play Jackrabbit on this program, I'm going to play Ricochet Rabbit and continue to toss a few questions in your direction. So Danny, let me ask you about this. And for those of you who just tuned in, Danny shared a story at the age of 28 where he, along with a colleague, were in a terrible accident, the accident of which took his good friend's life, took his own life, and he came back from that death experience. Can you expand on that to the extent you're comfortable about? Sure. We hear about that, but it's rare that we get to meet somebody who's been through that experience. What did you see? What did you learn? And what was it like? Yeah,
right. So initially when the electricity traveled down the ladder and went in my hands, so it was about 8,000 to 10,000 volts, and you can imagine that jolt that hit the body. As soon as it did, I thought that there was either a nuclear explosion or I was shot, because I'd never experienced a surge like that in my body. And in that instant, when that happened, after that I just became very, very calm and very peaceful. I knew something was taking place. I didn't yell, help me, save me. What I did see was the other guy on the roof coming down off the roof because he heard the ladder hit the wire. So he turned at that pop and started coming down the ladder. So I'm seeing him coming down the ladder, and I'm yelling to him. I'm yelling to him, hey, get so-and-so. I'm telling him to get the other guy, because I know, I'm okay. I'm not yelling for me. I knew something was taking place. So what happened then is I watched him come down a little bit, and I saw the scene. I didn't hover, when people talk about they hover. And then I was pulled away from the scene. I was no longer in my body. I didn't travel through a tunnel. I didn't see it. I wasn't welcomed by any dead relatives. But my soul, my spiritual essence that I believed I had before that day, and now I absolutely know I have, it was joined with what I'll call God. And it was the best feeling you can ever imagine. You can't even describe it in words. It was absolute love. It was absolute peace. It's what we're all intended, I believe, to get to at some level. And this God that I was with, and we weren't hovering or anything, we communicated. and we didn't use words. And again, he wasn't a gray-haired old man holding 2 tablets or anything of that nature. But it was just absolute love, and you were communicating on a whole different level than we as human beings know. And through our communication, at one point I said, and I'll use the word said because of course I didn't use words, but I said, what about my mom and what about Lisa? And Lisa's my wife. She wasn't then, but she is now. We've been married 19 years. And as soon as I expressed that concern for them, it was right back in my body. I just went like this. And as I came to, I felt as though I was laying on my side in fetal position. You know, all my tingly nerves suggested that I was in fetal position, yet I was laying spread eagle looking at the ladder that had landed on the phone line below the electric line. And then I could hear the guy who had come and helped me, you know, working on our other buddy. And I couldn't move. You know, I guess the electricity just kind of numbed me. It was almost like when you sleep on your arm and you're looking at your elbow and you're trying to move it, but it won't move your arm. So after maybe, I don't know, a minute and a half or so, 90 seconds, I started to get back my motor skills. And I crawled over next to my buddy who was working on our other friend. Actually, it was his brother. And, you know, just moved in and started to help with CPR. And the guy looked at me and just said, you know, I can't believe you're here. Because as he came down the ladder, he had come to me first. And his thought was, we killed Dan. Because he said, your eyes are rolled back, you were foaming at the mouth, you had no heart rate, he was trying CPR, my chest would go up and then it would go down, no life. So then he left me and ran across the street, called 911, ran back past me, and then went to our other friend, his brother. As we then worked on the CPR, the paramedics came, the police came and all, and they moved us away. And that's when I went and I sat against a fence. And I remember it was July, I didn't have a shirt on, but, you know, it was 95 degrees, a windy day. And I was sitting against this fence probably 30 yards from the activity, and I felt my feet really hurt. And I looked down, James, at my work boots. You know, I had leather work boots on, and they had little holes in them, real small little holes. And I took my boots off, and then my white socks, my sweat socks, had big holes with black around them, and then I took them off, and I had holes on both sides of both feet, and was just looking in, but there was no blood because it had got cauterized when it came out. So, you know, essentially, if you can see, I mean, I was kind of looking into my foot. And here's the last part about this. As the other friend came down to me, he said, you know, what happened? I said, you know, I guess we hit that wire. I thought we were going to be clear. And I said, what? He said, I turned, you know, I heard the pop and I turned around. And I said, I know, I saw you. And he said, I turned around, you were out. And I said, didn't you hear me yelling to you? I was yelling to you. And he said, you didn't say anything. So that's when I was sitting there, probably 10 minutes after the actual accident, 15, maybe 10 probably. And I'm going, wait a minute, well, what happened? Where was I? And that's when I just, you know, I realized that God had given me the gift of a little time on heaven's front porch, so to speak. And then the journey afterwards was, you know, I didn't want to be here. I had experienced such a lovely existence. You know, that was my soul or spiritual essence. And my friend was dead, so I just didn't want to be here. And that's the distinction I make, where I was living, but I wasn't alive. So I had to seek support, be still, evolve, know myself, develop some vision. And, you know, it took some time. And people will say to me, do you wish it never happened? And I say, no. No, what I wish never happened is my friend died. That's what I wish never happened. You know, the experience for me and the growth that's come out of it, and hopefully, you know, the inspiration that I can help other people because of my experience for all of us, you know, I wouldn't trade that. But, you know, I wish my friend was still here.
You know, as I often say, Danny, on this program, that gifts in life don't always come in gaily wrapped packages. And the gift of unlocking the genius inside of you by what your gift is to go out to give to the world through that unfortunate, sad situation is a lesson for all of us to take and learn from. And the curiosity comes about as you described what it was like for you, distinctly different from those that say they were in a tunnel or met by relatives. I suspect in your journey you've come across a number of people who've had that experience.
Yes.
And from a, I don't know, would you say a numbers perspective, is that more common and less common? Is it unique that people have that? You know, we hear it anecdotally, and sometimes someone's on a talk show but your radar screen would be tuned in.
Yeah.
I mean, how often is that around us? To the extent it is.
Yeah, a lot. A lot of people that I've talked to have that. They see the tunnel, they see the light, but there's quite a few people too that share a similar experience to what I had, where they knew they were crossing over and they were with another presence of love. Sometimes they hovered, sometimes they went to a dark place like me, sometimes they went to a light place. But it's interesting. I had a guy out in Colorado that I was talking with, and he was in a seminar that I was doing, not about this, but years ago. I'd shared my story quickly, and he came up to me and said that he was in a really bad car accident and had that experience, and then he was in a coma for quite some time. And we talked about it, and he said same thing. He was connected to some source of love. There was no bodies. And then, he was in a coma for some time and then came out of it, but certainly remembered that. And he asked me, and we talked a little bit, because a lot of times when you meet somebody that's had a similar experience, you say, well, is there anything different about it? And this guy was great. I can remember he was really cool. And he said, I can see colors around people now. And it goes from black to white. It's just like an aura. It's like a glow. And he said, I can walk into a party and look across the room and see a guy or a lady, and it's just like a dark cloud. And then he says, it goes to white. And I said, have you ever seen the bright, bright white? And he said, yeah, I've seen about 1 or 2 people with that bright white. And, of course, as you would, and I'm sitting there, I looked at him. He was a great guy, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him. I said, I got to ask you, what color do I have? And he kind of smiled and hit me on the shoulder. He said, it's a really, really light gray. And I said, oh, good, thanks, man. But, yeah, it's really, it's nice when you connect with people that have had a similar experience, or even people that just want to know about it. And, they believe, but they're not quite sure. I'll just throw this in. We talk about success. I was working with a venture capitalist hedge fund up in New York City. A guy, I guess he was probably in his 50s and worth gobs and gobs of money. He used to work for one of the large financial companies up there, and then spun out and started his own firm. And I was in there doing some consulting work with he and his team. And he called me in the office before I left New York City. Of course, as you can imagine, big, beautiful office, glass and everything else. And he said, I like the consulting work. It's really going to help our team. He said, but I got to really know, is there something after this? And I said, yeah, I believe there is. And he said, thanks. That's what I believe, too. So here's a guy that has amassed a tremendous fortune, but he also knows that spiritual side, and he as a dad with his family is really vital, really necessary to life.
You don't get to take it with you, do you?
They didn't ask me if I had any when I was showing up.
Just check the pockets.
Yeah, they didn't. There was no conversation around material world when I went up there.
Well, let's talk. Given the folks that tune in that are family members or have children, and given the angle with which you've gotten to see the precious nature of life in a way that many of us may not see until we see it, and maybe not able to talk about it, at least on this earth.
Right.
How does it influence you as a parent? We can't put our kids in a bubble yet. The preciousness of life with which we don't understand as a youth, right? How does it influence your parenting skills?
Good question. I think it just makes me more aware of the big picture, and gives me the ability to excuse some things that aren't really a big deal. So again, you get back to don't sweat the small stuff. But as my kids grow now, we've got Luke, Joey, and Lizzie. Luke's a freshman at college. Joey's a sophomore in high school, and Lizzie's 12. I think, and they've read the book, and they understand my journey, and we've talked to them. I think they all have a really good, strong foundation for their faith. And, what I'm trying to do as a parent is just to make sure that they let that faith guide their behavior, because I think our behavior here on earth has some bearing on whether or not we experience, or what degree we experience, heaven afterwards. For me, I definitely had that reflecting of your life, with that divine power that I was with. So it's just the ability to, try to stay tuned to the big picture, and just continue to raise them to be good people of faith, And it's not, we're Catholic, so Catholicism works for us, but it's not about, when I do my talks, it's not about, Catholic, Methodist, or, it's just about, are we connected, and do we have principles that lead us to be better people because we believe there's a God. there's the old joke that a guy got to heaven and he's going through 3 rooms and he sees the Methodists, and they're in there and they're having a meeting and everything else is happening and they're all involved, and then the next room has the Baptists and they're singing and they're clapping and praise Jesus and they're rocking and rolling, and then the guy with him, shh, gotta be quiet. He's walking by and everybody's in this room and they're very, very quiet, and the guy says, who is that? And he looks over, he says, they're the Catholics. We have to be quiet. They think they're the only ones here. So,
and their way is the right way.
Yeah, so I mean, I love, Catholic is a good, strong faith for me, but I believe that, Jesus has put a lot of paths for us to get there.
Well, let me touch on this, because we talked about this, getting ready for this program, and in light of, the great game of life, we can all look at life physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and spiritually is one where there's often some hesitancy to have discussion around, but in terms of being conscious and authentic, it strikes me from our prior discussions and what you've been through, you use the word faith, but your belief in God is quite strong, and let's just say you've got an autographed copy of one of his works that you received, that many of us probably won't see again until perhaps crossing over.
Right.
But talk a little bit about the influence of that, or how that impacts your work, and are people receptive to as you bring God into the fold? Are you cautious as you unfold that part of the journey?
Well, James, this is, as the book came out, this is the book and my focus on doing some more speaking is something that I couldn't suppress anymore. Because the book talks about being happy and fulfilled and seek support, and in that principle of seeking support, you've got to go to that divine source. Abraham Lincoln had a great quote. He said, "I was driven many times to my knees by the overwhelming conviction I had nowhere left to go." So you think about what he dealt with, right, leading our country through all the Civil War and slavery and everything else. So, I'm doing a talk in Washington, D.C. next week, and I've known this guy for some time, and he knew me more as a professional going in, and he wants me to come in and speak about the book, and I said, I'd love to. I said, but you got to understand I'm going to talk about God. And if that's not going to fly, then, I wish you all the best, but I'm not coming in now. So you see, for me, I can't suppress talking about it. And anybody that knows me, I've always been a strong believer in God. It's just that now, after that, I got the gift that it is there. Faith is belief without proof. That's what they call faith. But now I have proof. So it's I almost feel like now it's a ministry for me, to slow people down and make sure that they're moving towards a real rich relationship with that, what I call God. And again, it's not religious. I come at it more from a spiritual nature.
But as you talk about that, and what I'm encouraged by, and sort of encourage other folks, because we often talk about the support systems and the resources, and is to make sure that we tap into all the resources that are available to us. And one way to look at it is the resources that are available to us that come to mind are brought to us by a larger resource, right? That sometimes we're hesitant to tap into, perhaps because we can't see it or don't understand it, or the confusing nature of it.
Right.
And yet, information is power used in the right direction. So
right.
I reinforce the value of people learning more about your journey, and maybe if they're curious about how they get to know this aspect of their life, it strikes me as in a non-preaching way, meaning not to scare people, because I think people get scared that they're going to be converted. In my case, it used to be, oh no, here comes the God Squad, they're going to get me, they're going to get me.
Right. Oh yeah, the holy rollers.
It's just to understand, right? And the gift is, like, in terms of imparting things with people, like we talked about that person in the grocery store and the words they use, is here's a different way to look at the game, or how you've come to, or how your gifts have been given to you, and how to open those gifts and give them away, and where to find some energy. So I think there's so much power in your message. And what happened to you, the accident was no accident, right?
Yeah, I that's one way to interpret it, but I stopped trying to figure that out because I couldn't. I tried for so long to figure out why it happened. And part of one of the principles, again, is to evolve, to undergo continuous and gradual change. So I've just adopted that now. When things happen that aren't great or good or desirable, how can I evolve through that? So I did for a long time try to figure it out. People said to me, oh, it wasn't your time, you're here for a purpose. And I don't know, that could be the case, but I don't put too much energy around that. I really just try to, show up and listen. And, I think God's been knocking on my door pretty hard here, and I've suppressed it for a number of years. And, I'm ready to kind of go out there and talk about Him a little bit more. Or her.
Or them. Well,
yeah.
Well, and listen, it wouldn't be bad to have you as a friend or neighbor or travel companion. I do a fair amount of time on airplanes, as I'm sure you do, and nothing like having a good luck charm sitting next to you. So I might coordinate my travel schedule, Danny, around flights through Philadelphia.
I would love it.
Good way to get to San Francisco for me down here in Southern California is through Philadelphia now.
Yeah, there you go.
Whatever it takes. Hey,
that would be cool.
Tell us about we're going to have the 5-year anniversary of the Danny Bader story and the show, and a lot will have unfolded between now and that point in time, step by step. But
right.
That's a phase and a stage of what you're going to be when you grow up.
Sure.
Tell us what you see and what we might see or what we will see as life unfolds for you over the next couple of years.
So you want me to tell you my vision, huh?
It's based on all these people that I told you have tuned in. They've been asking.
You got it.
Walk the talk, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I got it. So if I was to see you in 3 or 4 years from now, and you say, "How's life, Danny?" and I say, "It's wonderful," and you say, "Why?" I'm going to say, because my relationship with my wife and my brothers and sisters and my family and my children is really solid, and my 3 children are continue to grow into wonderful young people. My relationship with God is very, very strong. The book sold an awful lot, and I got tremendous feedback from people. We made it into a movie starring Jennifer Aniston. And I've written 2 other books, and I have a talk show as well. So how's that for vision?
Listen, if you're not sure, then we'll come back to it.
Yeah, right. And if we go physical, I'm 12% body fat, but I don't know. It's tough to get that low. I think I hover. I can't, those beers and cheesesteaks here in Philly.
It could be those Body by Bader T-shirts that are out there 5 years from now.
I don't know about that. I don't know.
6-pack takes on a different connotation in your life now, I'm sure.
Yeah, right.
So if Jennifer is the leading lady, who plays Danny Bader in the movie?
Well, we're not quite sure. I've got my kids. They're all kind of trying to cast that. The character's name is Jake in the book.
Okay.
So we're not quite sure. They go back and forth about who might fit that bill. And then there's other characters too, Brendan and Paul and Sammy, and Noah's the little kid that's fighting some challenges. He's in a wheelchair. So, yeah.
Wow.
We'll see.
And as we close out, you also touched on, and I know that Make-A-Wish is an important part of your life. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe if we can encourage people to do some things that'll make them feel good, and that's often in the service to other people.
Sure.
Touch on that for us a bit.
Sure. Yeah, I got involved with that years ago when I worked for a financial company in Wilmington, Delaware, and they encouraged us to do some volunteering. And it's just a wonderful organization, and they grant wishes. Most people are familiar, but if you're not, you can just go to Make-A-Wish. I think it's makeawish.org. Just do a Google, you'll find it. I work with the Mid-Atlantic chapter, and I just work as a wish granter. So what they do is you go out in pairs and you meet families, and they have children who are suffering, some health challenges right now. So you just meet them and you talk about what their wish is, and then you kind of process the paperwork and help them fulfill some wish. And it's a really, really cool and fulfilling piece of volunteer work to get involved in. I often feel selfish sometimes when I do it, because I always have to stop and check, am I really doing it for the family and the children, or am I doing it for me? Because when I leave and when I drive home by myself, it's not as if you're surrounded by people, but I just feel really, really good. And I know that when I roll home, I'm a better father, I'm a better husband, those things.
Nice.
So I would encourage everybody, if you're not giving back in some way to other people, think about what action you might need to move in that direction, because that is a tremendous source of happiness for us. We're intended to do it. We're intended to do it. Albert Schweitzer said that. Albert Schweitzer, won a Nobel Peace Prize, and he said, I don't know what the recipe for success is. He says, but I do know those among you that will be truly happy are those who have found and sought how to serve. So we got to help one another out. Life's going too fast. We need each other.
I believe that a relationship is a place you go to give, not to get, and that perhaps can make it the most fulfilling thing. And I think for those folks that are kind enough to give us their time and to tune in to the Danny Bader Show here today on Unopened Gifts, there is a lot to be said for the feeling that you get when you do something for somebody else with no expectation of any return, and many things that happen on this program. Maybe there's some nuances that are indeed new, but I think we have the opportunity to remind people, probably more than instruct people on a show like this, of stuff, fundamentals that sometimes get away from us in the frenetic, chaotic picture of life. And your message of getting clear, of taking a definitive step, of knowing what you want, of using your gift, of learning the lessons, and the visuals of saying it took 10 years for that book to come across the finish line, 20 years in the journey since the unfortunate accident, and perhaps with the blessings that you have, the best part of the Danny Bader story is now unfolding, and that's a gift for many people who don't even know you yet, but a lot more know you by virtue of this program today, so I thank you. Thank you, James. I really appreciate the time, and I wish you all the best. And everybody listening, too. All the best. We've had the great gift of people all over the world tuning into this program, and for those of you for the first time or coming back, this is Unopened Gifts, and the purpose of this program is to inspire you to hear something from somebody who comes on this program that'll light that torch of enthusiasm or inspiration or help provide the impetus to move forward to do the things that you're gifted to do in life, because we don't know how long this life is promised. Guys like Danny have been given a second chance. One interpretation of it is to help us to recognize that we don't want to miss the chance we have. And Danny Bader on Unopened Gifts, tell us one more time, how do they find you? www.dannybader.com. All right. And again, thank you for having me, James. I wish everybody out there the best, so be well. My friend, enjoy Jersey, rock 'em in Washington, D.C. next week. Go Philadelphia Eagles. And we will have the anniversary edition show. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in this Thursday afternoon. Tune in again next week, 5 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock for the next edition of Unopened Gifts. I am your host, James McPartland. Thanks for coming in with us today. Cheers. Peace. Thanks, James. Thank you, man.
Today's podcast is brought to you by ObesityHotline.com, the silent killer, providing support and encouragement in the prevention of this rising epidemic. Featuring the Body by Vi Challenge. Is there a quick answer to the question? Go to www.obesityhotline.com. You're listening to Real Coaching Radio TV, building a positive network.